Hello and welcome to the Business Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Holly Worton. I've been an entrepreneur since 1999, and I know firsthand how difficult it can be to build a business without the right mindset. This is a podcast for those of us who struggle with showing up in our business with confidence and authenticity, who resist taking big action because of fears and doubts, who know deep down that it's possible to create something bigger, and yet you're not. This podcast combines powerful strategies on how to upgrade your business mindset, along with practical business tips to grow your business more easily in a way that feels aligned. This podcast features solo shows with me and also interviews with inspiring women entrepreneurs from around the world, including my monthly co-hosted episodes with Joe Casey. My goal is to help you grow your business more quickly and easily by transforming your mindset. For me, mindset work is a lifelong practice, and I want to help you make a habit out of mindset work. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now, let's get into this week's episode. Hello and welcome to the Business Mindset Podcast, episode 252. This is your host, Holly Worton, and I'm back with another solo episode. Today, I'm going to talk about a topic that was recently requested. I'm going to talk all about self-discipline, how to set a goal or set an intention, keep your word, follow through with your plans, and make stuff happen. Apparently, people think I'm good at this, which was actually a really interesting observation because I hadn't realized that I was good at this. So, this was very useful to hear, and I hope that you find this episode useful because I do think that this is a skill that's really important to have. If you're running a business, you've got to do stuff, and sometimes that's little stuff, sometimes that's big stuff. But if you have a big goal, a big vision for yourself, for your life, for your business, you've got to be able to follow through with your plans and your intentions and your goals. So today, I hope to give you some tips and ideas that will help you to make stuff happen and get stuff done. So as I was writing my notes, my kind of bullet points that I use to do an episode, I started thinking about why would someone think that I'm good at self-discipline? Like, what are the things that I've followed through with or managed to make happen that might catch someone's attention? Yeah, it actually wasn't very hard. So I came up with some key things. So this podcast, for one, this is episode 252 of the podcast. This show was started in August of 2013, and it's going to be 5 years old this August. It's something that I have followed through with every single week for the last 252 weeks. I haven't missed a week at all. Yeah, when I think about that, I'm really actually impressed with that because I've not been able to follow through with other things. I've not been able to blog on a consistent basis or write newsletters on a consistent basis, although I have gotten better with that. So I've shared some things before about why I think I've been so consistent with this podcast. I really enjoy it. I've outsourced the bits that I find difficult, and I did that from the very beginning. I got help with the things that I didn't want to do, which is audio editing, posting the thing, uploading it to Libsyn, all that stuff. I have a fantastic guy who's been helping with me from the beginning, and I recommend him all the time. He's been great, and he's helped me make this podcast what it is. All I do is I do my interview or my conversation with someone else or my solo episode, send him the file, send him the graphic, he does all the rest. And then all I do is Monday mornings, show up and share the thing online. And that takes me about a half an hour. So I have streamlined this process in a way that makes it really, really easy. I get support in the stuff I don't like to do, and I just show up and do the things that I do want to do. So I think that's been really key in making this happen. So as I said with blog posts, I used to be more consistent, and then I just kind of stopped once I realized that I really want my main form of content creation to be the podcast. Simply because it's so easy. And as I've said before, I never would have guessed that doing this podcast would be so easy for me because I'm not a big talker. I'm not the kind of person that finds it really easy to just speak on a topic for a half an hour or longer. It was really a surprise for me, a pleasant surprise. So I think that's why I've decided to let go of the blog. I will blog every once in a while when I have something to say that I feel like needs to be written. But in terms of writing content, I'm going to be focusing on my books from now on. So podcast as main form of content has allowed me to let go of pressure that I would put on myself to write blog posts. And then there's the newsletter. For the last several months, I've been pretty good about sending weekly newsletters. I have kind of fallen off the bandwagon the last couple of weeks, mainly because I've been sending out fairly frequent GDPR reconsent emails, trying to hopefully get as many people as possible to opt back into my list so I can make it compliant with the GDPR guidelines, which are going into effect next week. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, drop me a line or check the show notes and I will send you some links that can help you get GDPR compliant. I've signed up for a couple of different workshops and information packs that have really helped me to get compliant. This is an EU law, but it applies to you and your business even if you're not in the EU, because you probably have European people on your mailing list and visiting your website and kind of connecting with your business in some way. So this is something, no matter where you are in the world, that you need to know about. And speaking of GDPR and getting compliant, that was something that, I've been researching it for a while. I had signed up to these two. My friend Alice did this really good workshop and had created a checklist and things to help people with GDPR. Signed up for that several weeks ago. Also signed up for this other thing several weeks ago, and I've kind of been going through it for the last few weeks or the last couple of months, but it's not something that I enjoyed. I know that ultimately these laws are important to have, but they're a pain in the ass for the small business, especially the getting reconsent on your email list just really annoyed me, because you can opt out of an email list if you don't want to be on it. It's not that big a deal, and I don't mind unsubscribing from things. I do it all the time. So it's kind of a law that annoyed me, and I really kept putting off getting compliant and setting up my new privacy policy and cookie policy and getting the reconsent on the email list and changing the language on my opt-in stuff. I did some of it little by little, but it wasn't until actually today that I spent most of the day reviewing videos and checklists and getting stuff compliant. So that was a harder one for me to follow through with and be disciplined with, because I hated the kind of work. I don't like that nitpicky stuff. And again, the law I didn't like it. So this is ridiculous. So it was harder for me to follow through with, but ultimately I did, because it's the law and you have to. And the fines can be really bad if you don't comply, because people will be able to report you and you can be audited. So I kept putting it off, and I time blocked several blocks of 2 hours to go through it. And I kept kind of dragging it on my Google Calendar and dragging it towards the end of the week and then popping it to the next week and putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. But the deadline is this week, May 25th. So I kind of waited till the last minute to wrap up all the last minute details, but I did it. So again, that's something that was difficult to follow through with, but I did ultimately because it's the law. So that's GDPR. So something else business related that I think I've been really good at, well, good and bad at following through with, is my books, my writing. So 2 years ago in 2016, I wrote and released 6 books. 4 of them were business mindset books, 2 of them were walking books, and then last year I released a 3rd walking book, and that was all the writing I really did last year. So what was the difference between releasing 6 books in 2016 and 1 book in 2017, and so far no books in 2018, although I have 3 books planned for this year? The difference was doing the work. The difference was making a list, making a commitment, and doing my workcation weekends. I'm going to tell you a secret. My workcation weekends, which I've been telling everyone about for the last couple of years because they've been so useful to my business, not only writing my books, but creating other big projects. I just did my first workcation weekend last weekend or the weekend before, a couple weekends ago. For the first time in 6 months, I went 6 months without doing a workcation weekend. Hence, no books being published in several months. Mainly because my brain works really good on hyperfocus, and I find the Workcation weekend really, really, really the best way for me to get big projects done, especially books. I'm not the kind of person that can just write an hour a day or half a day a week. I really need that intense focus of the Workcation to get books written. And if you don't know what I'm talking about in terms of the Workation weekend, I will include a link in the show notes. I have this definitive guide to the Workation weekend, which is a free download, and there's no opt-in required because I removed the opt-ins from all of my free gifts. So I will send you the link to that. You don't need to give me your email address or anything. It is absolutely free. And I do encourage you to check it out because it can be such a powerful way to get stuff done. So my books, I have been good at following through and being disciplined and publishing, and then there have been times when I haven't. So I think that's a really interesting and useful example as well, because I've been disciplined and then I've fallen off the bandwagon. A couple of non-business things, fitness things, because I think these are lifestyle things that can be challenging for people. Kind of the two main things that I've been doing for the last couple of years in terms of fitness are kickboxing and walking or hiking. So let's start with kickboxing. Kickboxing I started, it's going to be 3 years in August. My entire life I had wanted to do a martial art. I remember being 6 years old and going to the library and checking out books on karate and judo, and I really, really wanted to do a martial art, and I never did until 3 years ago. And I don't know what it was that made me decide that that was going to be the year, 2015, was going to be the year that I did a martial art, but I just did. I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine about it. I went home and I decided this was going to be the year, and I got online and I found a website that had like a quiz on what's the best martial art for you. And so I took the quiz, and I remember it came up with either kickboxing or MMA. And then I did another quiz and it came up with kickboxing or, I'm going to butcher the name, Krav Maga, the Israeli martial art. And all three of those options sounded really good, but for some reason kickboxing just resonated. My gut kind of went there. And so then the next thing I did was I just Googled kickboxing Dorking, and I found the school that I now go to, and I went to a trial class and I loved it and I joined, and I've been doing it ever since. And I've been super disciplined with kickboxing. So one of the first things that I did when I signed up for that was I learned how the grading worked. It's usually every 3 times a year for the lower belts and then twice a year for the advanced grades. And I mapped out how long it was going to take me to get my black belt. And the answer, if you do every grading and pass every grading, is about 5 years. So I mapped it out in my journal. I still have it. And every time I pass a grading, I kind of highlight and celebrate that new grade. And I've not missed a grading ever since. There have been times that my kickboxing grading has conflicted with other really important life events, and I've prioritized that because it was really, really important to me. I wanted to stay on track. I wanted to grade. I wanted to pass the grade, and I made it happen. So now I'm a brown belt, I'm very happy to say, and at the end of the year, I will be hopefully grading to brown white. So that's kickboxing. Something I've always wanted to do, something clicked, and I decided I was going to make it happen, and I did, and I've been making it happen ever since. And I love it. So yeah, I'm very, very pleased to have finally done that. So the next is the walking or hiking. As you know, being outdoors, being in nature, that stuff is really, really, really important to me. I feel wrong if I haven't spent enough time out in nature. And last year, for the first time, I did the Walk 1,000 Miles challenge, and I'm doing it again this year slightly differently. So last year, I signed up for the Walk 1,000 Miles challenge, and I'll link to that in the show notes because if you like walking, I highly recommend that you give it a try. They also do a Walk 500 Miles challenge, which starts about midway through the year. So I was curious how much I walk in a year because I had no idea. I had never tracked it before. So last year in 2017, I decided I was going to sign up for the Walk 1,000 Miles challenge, track all of my walking miles, set up a spreadsheet, tracked everything, and I realized that I do walk just about 1,000 miles a year because I ended the year having walked exactly 1,005 miles. And I clocked my final miles on December 30th, the day before the end of the year. And that was a really fascinating process to me because I'd started out doing it just out of curiosity to see how many miles I walked, but I'd built the spreadsheet in the way that I had a column that helped me know where I needed to be to stay on track. And as the year progressed, I realized that I didn't just want to know how many miles I walked. I wanted to walk 1,000 miles. And that meant that sometimes I went walking on days when the weather wasn't perfect. I would go out walking even when I sometimes didn't feel like walking. And then, of course, I loved it once I was out there. It pushed me to walk a bit more than I normally would, just so I could reach that goal. And then pushed me to walk towards the end of the year so that I could complete that 1,000 miles just one day before the year ended. That was also a really, really interesting challenge because it was a challenge to do something that I liked. It encouraged me to do more of this thing that I liked. And what really, really helped with that was having that spreadsheet to stay on track. So having those weekly milestones, knowing how much I had to walk a week to stay on track, knowing where I had to be each week to get back on track if I had fallen behind, and I did fall behind for much of the year. That spreadsheet was really, really useful to make me do what I needed to do to achieve my goal. So that is walk 1,000 miles, and I'm doing that challenge again this year. But this year I'm not tracking all miles walked. I'm only tracking what people in the Facebook group call boots on walks. So that's basically nature walks. So when I go out into the woods, when I go out and, to Avebury, wherever, when I'm out in nature, those are the miles that I'm tracking. So that, of course, makes it a bit more challenging because last year I counted all the miles. So it's interesting, again, this year, because I'm pushing myself a little bit more to make sure that I get out and do the kinds of miles that I most enjoy. So if I go out and walk, if I go into London and walk all over the place, that doesn't count for me personally this year because those are urban miles. So the next kind of fitness thing is something that it's not new to me, but I'm coming back to. So I used to be a runner. It's something that I picked up when I was in my mid-20s and loved it. And then somehow I stopped running. And then every once in a while I would kind of pick it up and then stop again and then pick it up and then stop again. And since I started kickboxing, I really haven't been running very much at all. However, now that I'm in the advanced grades, the gradings are much more intense. So rather than being a 2-hour thing on a Sunday morning or afternoon, it's a 2-day thing that involves all kinds of fitness, including a big chunk of time that we'll have to be running. So I'm not grading until the winter course, which is in December, but I'm going to do the summer course, which is in July, as kind of practice so I know what it's like when I do the actual grading in December. So I have started a Couch to 5K program, which I'll actually link to because if you've ever wanted to start running or get back into running, the NHS has a really good Couch to 5K program, and they also have a podcast that's basically like a personal trainer in your ear that helps you train. It's so good. So I started that this week, and I've done 2 runs so far. I'm going to do another one on Sunday. And because I haven't exactly planned, I should have started a week ago if I wanted to do the 9-week program in time for the grading. But because I'm not a brand new runner, I started out yesterday with the week 1 training and realized I could easily do week 2. So I did start week 2 today, and I'm going to do that again on Sunday and then bump up to week 3 on Tuesday. Again, so this is it's not brand new, but challenging for me because I used to love running and then stopped, and it's been really, really hard to get back into it. So this is kind of a new recommitment for me. And I have committed to doing this Couch to 5K program, which is running 3 times a week between now and I think it's July 7th and 8th, which is when the summer course for kickboxing is. So that is my commitment. So, to run through these things that I think I'm good and disciplined at, we've got the podcast, which I've committed to doing a weekly podcast for the last 252 weeks, including this one. We've got my books, which my new commitment is quarterly books starting this year. However, I created that commitment a bit late, so this year I'm committing to at least 3 books. And then from starting next year, I'll be committing to quarterly books. So that's 4 books a year. And the idea is to do 1 business mindset book, 1 walking book, 1 fiction book, and 1 whatever I feel like. And then if I do more books than that, that's a bonus. But I'm committing to quarterly books. Kickboxing, I'm still committed to doing and passing all of my gradings. So from here on out, that means December doing the winter course, next year in July doing the summer course, and then I've got to wait a year to do the black belt grading, so that would be July of the following year doing the summer course, and hopefully passing my grading there. Walking, committed to walking 1,000 miles of nature or boots on walking. And running, I have committed to 3 runs a week, following this Couch to 5K program between now and the summer course. I will probably have to keep that up until the end of the year when I have the winter course and do the grading, but I will probably change my training program because I don't know exactly what kind of running we're going to have to do. I'm going to have to probably step it up a bit because I think it's a bit more intense than just 5K. So those are my commitments to the top 5 things that I think I'm good at. And I'm aware that 2 of those are business things and 3 of those are lifestyle things. But I thought you would find that useful to hear my examples. So what about you? How can you be disciplined? How can you keep your word and follow through with the things that you think are important to you or the goals that you've set? Before I get started with this, I've selected these 5 things to tell you about, but there's a load of other things that you don't know about. I have so many ideas that I don't have time to do them all. So there are all these things that I've thought, oh, I would love to do that I haven't committed to doing because I just don't have the time or the energy. So all of those things that I think, oh, that would be such a great idea, those go into Evernote. I used to have a journal where I would write them down, and I probably still have that journal somewhere. It was a special journal where I put ideas. Now they go into Evernote. So I have lists of book ideas, project ideas, business ideas, all kinds of stuff that would be so much fun to do when I decide to make them a priority. So the reason I'm sharing that is because we have limited time and we can't always do all the things we want to do. So to me, being disciplined and following through with things starts with making a commitment. It starts with making a commitment to doing the things that are really important to you and that you absolutely want to do. So for me, business-wise, that is focusing on the podcast as my primary means of regular content on a weekly basis, and then my books as kind of more in-depth content. Fitness lifestyle-wise, that is doing my walking, my kickboxing, my running. I probably could also include kind of spiritually focused goal or commitment. I have mentioned in previous podcasts that I've signed up to do the OBOD Bardic grade in Druidry. I signed up last year and I've been doing that ever since. That's a year-long program. Then there's a 2nd year and 3rd year. So I have committed to doing that. So there is a Bardic grade exercise or ceremony that I do every morning. And then there are weekly kind of lessons that we study. So that actually is kind of a 6th commitment that I've got to that. So step 0 is make a commitment. Pick the things that you want to do, whether it's in your spiritual life, your health and well-being, your business. All this stuff is kind of related. So making a commitment to something spiritual or fitness, that will help you build the commitment muscle to help you with stuff in your business. So pick something and commit to it. And if you're the kind of person that thinks you're not good at self-discipline, or you think you're not good at following through with things, just pick one thing. Don't overwhelm yourself. So I've given you 6 examples of things that I've committed to. There might be more, but start with one. Pick one thing, commit to it, and do it. Keep it simple. Do not overwhelm yourself. This is really, really important. So pick one business thing to commit to, pick one personal thing to commit to, or whatever, or just pick one. Keep it simple. As you're picking this one thing, make sure you really, really want it. Make sure this is an absolute priority to you, something that you really, 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 really want to do for whatever reason, because it's going to make you happy, it's going to bring more joy into your life, it's going to make you feel fit and healthy, it's going to make your business prosper, whatever the reason is. Make sure you really, really, really want it because you're going to commit to it. Next, you've got to create a plan. So build a vision, get organized into goals, break everything down into steps that you need to do so that you can make it happen. And then get your time management organized by blocking out time in your calendar. I would never get anything done if I didn't do time blocking. I use Google Calendar for this because it's really easy to create recurring things. It's easy to drag and drop if I don't feel like doing something on one day and I want to do it another day. But I have my whole life planned out in Google Calendar. So to give you an idea of how specific I get, and I'm doing this because every time I mention this to people, they say, oh, you have everything in there. I never would have thought to add breakfast, lunch, and dinner to my calendar. I do. I have my whole day mapped out. So I've got the first thing I do every day is I kind of go downstairs, tidy up the house because my husband and I both work from home. He tends to work late into the night because that's how his brain functions. So I'll come downstairs and it's kind of a mess. So I tidy up, feed the cats, clean the litter box, basic life housekeeping stuff. My brain is not always good at waking up, so it's good for me to spend the first half hour of the day doing routine stuff that helps me wake up. I take my supplements, I drink my first glass of water, that kind of thing. And that's kind of my waking up time. Then I do my ceremony of the Bardic Grove, which I've just mentioned for my druidry training. Then I have breakfast. Then I have like an hour and a half of my morning ritual where I do journaling. I might read a book. I have it blocked out in my calendar as journaling and personal time. Then I get into my workday, usually starting at about 11 a.m. I have lunch blocked out in my calendar. I have dinner blocked out in my calendar. I have kickboxing blocked out. I have running blocked out. I have walking blocked out. I have emails and like admin work blocked out. I have all the other stuff promoting my podcast. I have a half hour on Monday, writing my email newsletter, half hour on Monday. Everything that I do on a regular basis gets blocked out in my calendar. Writing, I have tried blocking that out in my calendar. It's never managed to happen. And I've finally come to the conclusion that that's because my best way of writing is in Workations. So I'm probably going to delete that because it's not working. But everything else is blocked out in my calendar. Client sessions obviously get blocked out in my calendar. If I'm meeting up with a friend to have a chat on Skype, that's in my calendar. My master gut, which happens every other week, that's in the calendar. What else do I do? Donating blood, that's in the calendar. This is kind of perhaps too much information, but on the first day of my cycle, I will block that out in my calendar. It's actually blocked out in red. That's my special day where I don't do much because usually my energy levels are really low. I don't exercise that day because, again, energy levels. I try to keep it easy. I try to not do calls. I have a recurring every 26 days blocked out in my calendar. And what I usually do that day to kind of ensure that I take it easy is I do my henna. So I dye my hair with henna. That's a massive 6-hour process during which I look and smell absolutely disgusting. So I reserve that for the first day of the month of my cycle and spend all day doing that. So again, that ensures that no one's going to see me. I'm going to take it easy and be at home alone, looking horrible. So I've got that blocked out. Again, you get the idea. Any recurring things that you do, that goes in your calendar time blocked. Now, as I said, you can drag and drop. So the GDPR stuff that I was really not looking forward to doing, that got dragged and dropped a lot. But the recurring stuff that happens every day or every week, I try to not touch that because that is stuff that needs to get done and I'm committed to doing it and I do it. So if you don't know what I'm talking about with time blocking, Amber de la Garza, who has been a guest on this podcast and who has a fantastic podcast on productivity, I will link to her specific episode on time blocking. It's life changing. It is the only way I get stuff done, both projects and tasks and regular stuff and unusual stuff. That's the only way I get stuff done is if I put it in the calendar. If it's not in the calendar, it will not happen because it hasn't been scheduled. So take your discipline, the thing that you want to be disciplined with, take your commitment, break it down into steps, and time block it in your calendar. That is the number one, I think, best piece of advice that I can give you. But because this is the Business Mindset Podcast, and because I'm such a fan of working on one's mindset, the next step is look at what might get in the way. So it could be mindset stuff or it could be practical stuff. Do you need support? So as I said with my podcast, I have my fantastic podcast guy who has supported me from the very beginning. With my books, it's not really counted as support, but I have arranged to go away 1 weekend a month to work on my books. If my husband is not around because he's traveling, I have to get a cat sitter in, so that's kind of support to take care of the cats while I'm gone. So that's the support that I need for my books. I have all kinds of support in terms of typesetting, ebook formatting, cover design. There are people that support me with my books. I do not do it all myself because I'm not an expert in those things. Running is easy to make happen. My druidry training, that's easy to make happen. I don't need support with that. Kickboxing, don't need support with that. I just need to get to class and make it happen. So, do you need support in making this commitment happen? If you do, figure out what kind of support you need. Do you need childcare? Do you need what? Get that support. And then in terms of mindset stuff that can get in the way, it's time to look at those fears, those blocks, those limiting beliefs that might get in the way of you following through with these commitments. So if you have a technique that you use yourself, like Psych K, I will not ever stop recommending this, I don't think, because it's such an easy thing to train in. It's such an easy thing to use with yourself. If you have a technique that you've trained in, use it to transform your mindset and your beliefs. If you don't have a thing, do it because it's really powerful to train in something that you can use yourself, and also get help with someone else. I am always working with other people on healing energetic stuff, on working on mindset stuff. I don't always do it myself, but I do a lot of work myself. So going back to my list, podcast, if I ever have like fears or stuff coming up around the podcast, I will shift those beliefs. Can't think of anything I've had to work on that recently because I've been doing this for so long. My books, I absolutely work on my mindset around being a good writer, about writing books that people are interested in reading, about marketing my books, about putting my books out there, about launching my books. I do a fair amount of regular mindset work on that. Kickboxing, I have absolutely done a lot of mindset stuff around that, around being able to do well in my grading and pass my grading and do well in the sparring. I have had a lot of mindset work that I've had to do around that. Walking, that's pretty easy. I have done some mindset work around committing to the longer walks because those are more challenging. Not too much mindset work I've had to do there. Running, I might need to do some mindset work on my running. However, I know that I've done it before. When I very first started running, I went from couch to marathon in 6 months. So I know I can do it because I've done it before. So that makes it easier. But this is the time where you need to look at what might get in the way. Do you need support? Do you need to work on your mindset? Do you need to create a new set of beliefs that will support you in this thing that you've committed to? And then next, you've got to take action. So take inspired action. Go through that plan that you've created. So if the thing that you've committed to is a big project that requires lots of different stuff, take those steps, break it down into baby steps, time block those steps in your calendar and make them happen. Or if this thing that you've committed to is simply doing a thing over and over again, every day, every week, whatever, time block that stuff into your calendar and just do it. Take the action. But if what you've committed to is a big project, break that thing down into tiny, tiny steps so that you can take those baby steps and feel like you are making progress, because big projects are made up of small actions. If you're the kind of person that can benefit from accountability, then absolutely get accountability, whether it's by working with a coach or a mastermind or friends, tell a friend, tell a family member, whatever, do it. So for me, in terms of accountability, I've got my Master Gut group. So when I haven't committed to them in terms of the podcast, but I did when I made my decision to do quarterly books this year, I went into my Master Gut Facebook group and told them, this is my plan. I'm doing 3 books this year. Starting next year, I'm doing 4 books. This is what's happening. In terms of the personal stuff, like kickboxing, walking, running, I mean, I've told my husband about it, but before this episode, I don't think I'd ever shared those specific commitments to anyone else. So kickboxing, I made a commitment to myself in my journal back when I started. Walking 1,000 miles, I signed up for the program, which is a free thing, and committed to that at the start of the year. Running, I told my husband this week that I was going to start running and I was going to do the Couch to 5K to be ready in time for the summer course in July. So get accountability by telling the people that you need to tell who will support you in making this happen. And do what you need to do to step out of your comfort zone. So as you're taking these actions, as you're committing to this thing, if any mindset crap comes up along the way, shift those beliefs, shift those energy blocks, do the healing, the transformation work that you need to do to make this happen. A lot of times when we commit to stuff, we don't realize at the start all the stuff that's going to come up for us. So you've got to train your mind to be aware. As you're going on this journey of commitment and taking these actions and taking these steps and committing to this thing, stuff's going to come up. Be aware of that stuff, write it down, and do the work to make it happen. And finally, make it a priority. If you've committed to something that you want to follow through with, you've got to make it a priority. How do you do that? You time block it into your calendar as something that you are busy doing. So in Google Calendar, you can set up recurring or single activities, and you can set yourself as being available or busy for that time. If you're committing to doing stuff, set yourself as busy so that no one else can overlap in your calendar while you're doing that event. So I've got, for example, my Acuity calendar that I use for managing client sessions. That links into my Google Calendar so people can book in. When I'm doing stuff that I have committed to, people can't book into my calendar during those times because I'm blocked as being busy on Google. So make it a priority. You know, life is all about priorities, and making decision is about priorities. So for example, as I said, there were many times with my kickboxing grading that it overlapped with something else that was important to me. But I prioritized the kickboxing because it was more important to me than the other things that were going on that day. With my workations, I have prioritized doing a workation over doing something else that might be important to me, like a walk or an event or something else. Going out and running, I have prioritized 3 days a week running in the mornings, and that's going to cut into my journaling and personal time of my morning routine. But I've decided that running is more important to me for now. And I'm going to have to spend some more time doing my introspection and journaling at another time, maybe. That's something I can drag and drop in my calendar if I feel like I need extra time in that. But I have prioritized these things over other things because I have made the commitment and decided that they are important and they are top priorities for me in my life. So for example, this podcast episode, it's going live on Monday and I'm recording it Friday evening. Why? Because I waited to the last minute because I wasn't feeling like doing it, because I felt like I wasn't sure I had anything to say. Then I sat down and made a list and made it happen because I'm not going to miss an episode on my podcast. So Friday evening, and it's 8:56 in the evening as I'm recording this. I don't usually work this late. I'm doing it because I couldn't let Monday come without an episode, and I need to give my editing guy time to get the thing edited and get set up and out there. And I think he does that on the weekends. So I committed to it and I did it, and here I am doing it, and I'm about to wrap it up because this is about all I have to say. So I hope that this episode has been interesting and useful, and I hope that it helps you follow through with the things that are important to you, and I hope that it helps you make a commitment to the things that are important to you, and I hope that it gives you the specific kind of aspects of self-discipline that you need to do to keep your word and follow through with these things that you have committed to. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, whatever, please get in touch. You can email me at holly@hollyworton.com. Find me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram and get in touch there. You can also get in touch in my private Facebook group, Business Mindset Alchemists. I love it when people comment on the episodes, so pop in there and let me know what you think. If you head over to hollyworton.com/group, you will be redirected to the Facebook group, and I would love to see you in there. So again, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts or iTunes. It would mean the world to me. Next week's episode is a really juicy episode. It's a co-hosted episode with Joanna Hennon. She thinks this is one of our best episodes ever, and I think I agree with her. And next week, we ask the question, is wanting something really enough? And I love that this week's episode kind of flows into that one. So what we talk about is, as business owners, we all create visions for our business. We set goals, we take action, we commit to things. But is wanting something enough to actually make it happen? Is setting SMART goals enough? Are SMART goals even really smart? And if not, what should we be doing instead? So we're going to talk about the following. Why you have to really, really, really want something. The difference between wanting and choosing for something. Why things are in flow when we choose for the things that are in alignment for us. We discuss if you're really focused on making something work, how is that actually different from hustle? Because sometimes when you're really focused and getting something done to make it happen, it can kind of feel like hustle, but actually it's different. We talked about the difference between goals and intentions. We talk about why you have to be super clear on what the actual goal is, and it might not be what you think it is. We talk about how to get clear on what your soul wants you to do, or your higher self, and why this is so important. We talk about why you need to do the inner work first to create a foundation, why you need to feel high vibe as you're working toward this thing, and what does that actually mean. We talk about how to bounce back from setbacks along the way, how goal setting is different from manifesting, and whether or not you need to put everything else on hold when you're focusing on making something really big happen. So I love next week's episode. I think you're going to love it too. And I love the fact that it really ties into this week's episode about discipline and following through and making stuff happen. So tune in next week and you'll hear all about that. And remember to visit hollyworton.com/252 for the show notes on this episode, where I've got links to all the stuff I mentioned. So thank you again. Have a fantastic week. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Business Mindset Podcast. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for the topics that were discussed, at hollyworton.com. If you'd like to connect with other listeners and learn more about business mindset, join my private community for entrepreneurs at hollyworton.com/group. That will redirect you to the Facebook group. And if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to head over to iTunes and leave a quick review of this podcast. It just takes a minute. Thank you so much.